Hello, and welcome to a special edition of the Haaretz Podcast. I'm Allison Kaplan Sommer in Tel Aviv. At 8 a.m. Israel time on Saturday, sirens wailed throughout the country, signaling what many had been expecting over the past month and a half. It was finally happening, an attack on Iran. Early reports emerged from Israel about a preemptive strike being launched, and very shortly afterwards came American confirmation that this was a closely coordinated joint operation, with a video from President Donald Trump making a case to the United States public that an attack was a necessary move designed to protect U.S. interests and bases in the region against Iran in what had been named Operation Epic Fury. Israel's name for its campaign is Roaring Lion. Joining me for an update in a special edition of the podcast on the dramatic event so far and what is expected to play out over the coming hours and days is Haaretz senior defense analyst Amos Harel. Amos Harel, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Allison.
Amos, almost initially this morning, Israel announced that it had attacked Iran, and that was the headline for quite a while, that this was an Israeli operation. It took a little while before American officials confirmed to the media that they, too, had launched their operation against Iran, and then Trump released his video on Truth Social, in which he didn't even utter the word Israel. He was making his case for an American attack on Iran. As far as you have been following things, what exactly is playing out? Who is attacking, and do the U.S. and Israel have clearly defined roles in this?
There are two different aspects here. One is what went wrong regarding the coordination of the statements, and something obviously went wrong. It shouldn't have been portrayed as an Israeli attack. It's a joint attack. I think the U.S. is actually leading it, unlike the 12-day war last June. So it will take some time to correct this, but this is damaging from an Israeli point of view because to begin with, there's an enormous debate inside the United States regarding Israeli involvement. Is Israel pushing Trump into war, and so on. Regarding the operation itself, it's quite clear. This is an American-led campaign in which Israel takes a very important role. It's different than last year, where at that time Israel was leading the charge while Trump supplied a sort of a green light to Netanyahu, and then at the last moment decided to join in for the last few days of the attack. Those strikes against the Iranian nuclear sites, especially Fordo. At that time, there were discussions whether it was about Trump's fear of missing out and so on. This is a very different case. It was about the U.S. to begin with. You remember there were American pressures on. America was applying pressure on Iran regarding its nuclear plan and the attempt to restrain it. And then the protest broke in early January, and this led the president to promise that help was on the way and to decide finally to attack Iran. What he's looking for now it's quite clear. For the time being, at least, he's talking of regime change. He's calling on the Iranian public to move and to take action in order to take out the regime. And this is a whole different ballgame. The stakes are much higher than they were last year.
Is this level of coordination, the joint effort between the United States and Israel on a military level, unprecedented? We're seeing pictures of U.S. jets being refueled over Israeli skies. Is this something new?
I haven't seen anything like this in the past. We know that the Americans were involved during last year's war. We're familiar with the Iranian attacks and the American help given to Israel in April 24 and then in October 24. There's the history of the two Gulf Wars and so on, but we've seen nothing of this sort in the past. And what's interesting is, in spite of the fact that Trump spoke constantly about this possibility during the last 2 months, things were relatively unclear. We didn't know exactly where he was heading. There were a lot of doubts whether he was going to take action. And we're all familiar with the ongoing discussion and disagreement among the Republican Party. Some of the MAGA supporters do not like this idea at all, are afraid of getting entangled in a long war, and some of them are also tend to believe in all kinds of conspiracies about Israel leading this, about Israel pushing the United States to intervene, and so on. So this is, in a way, it's quite surprising considering the fact that the president is constantly talking. I can't say that it took the world by surprise, but it's not exactly what everybody was expecting. Until the last moment, even yesterday evening, some Israeli and American analysts were still assuming that this was not going to happen. And yet he made the decision, and he's, as far as we can tell now, he's going all the way. He's very, very ambitious about the whole thing.
Amos, what do we make of the Iranian response, the retaliation so far? There have been several countries hit now, not just Israel. Obviously, we are still in the middle of it. We're recording this between trips to our bomb shelters.
The Iranian response, accordingly, is quite massive. For the time being, it seems that Israel is not necessarily in the center of this. The Iranians have launched missile attacks against Bahrain, against the UAE, against Qatar. These are all countries that host American bases. They take a different position than Israel. They don't announce their assistance to the Americans. They're not involved in any kind of direct strikes against the Iranians. And in spite of this, this apparently is enough for the Iranians to shoot back, to launch missiles at those countries in the general direction of the American bases, but perhaps hitting on the vicinity of those bases. So this is different than the situation in Israel. Regarding Israel, as of now, the military is not giving us full details. We assume that dozens of missiles have been launched towards Israel. We know that most of them were intercepted, but we don't know enough about casualties. I would guess that if something very serious had happened, we would have known by now. Israel is not a dictatorship, and news goes around. It's very, very hard to hide casualties in Israel, and yet the policy for the time being is not to announce the full details, not to give the enemy any kind of information about how successful its strikes were. You cannot hold this in a country like Israel. You cannot hold this information secret for long. It remains to be seen whether these are the limits of what Iran can do right now, or whether, since they have so much else to deal with, Israel is no longer the top priority for them.
Do we have any signs that proxies like Hezbollah or the Houthis have joined or will join the effort?
We don't know yet. Hezbollah hasn't joined. It's quite clear. We'll see what happens. In June last year, they were still in a state of shock after the defeat to Israel in the war between, I'd say, July and November of 24. And they asked the Iranians to let them stay this one out. And the Iranians approved. This time, I would assume it would be different, and there will be some kind of expectation, especially if the regime finds itself, as we see now, with its back against the wall. I think there will be a lot of expectations from Hezbollah to intervene, to play a part in this, and at least to launch some rockets and missiles towards Israel. It hasn't happened yet. It could happen. Regarding the Houthis, they've already announced that they're resuming attacks on ships in the Red Sea, and I wouldn't be surprised if they try to launch either drones or ballistic missiles towards Israel. It's not the end of the world. We've went through this in the past. It's not the greatest threat on Israel right now, but there's a good chance that the Houthis would join as well. The bigger question has to do with Hezbollah and perhaps the Shiite militias in Iraq. But then again, you cannot defeat Israel by fighting such a campaign. There could be significant damage, especially from Iranian ballistic missiles. But what we know now of the balance of power between the two militaries and so on, I think it's quite evident that Israel has the upper hand, both Israel and the U.S. Compared to the Iranians. I wouldn't underestimate Iranian capabilities to cause us harm. We saw this in the last few days of the previous war, and yet this is not in any way an existential threat on Israel. The possible nuclear plan is something else, but not the ballistic missiles as they stand, considering the different layers of defense that Israel can use.
Almost with the amount of warning and preparation, one would think that the targets we're hearing were hit in Tehran. The government buildings would have been long cleared by top officials of the regime. And yet, Israel is already claiming that it has done damage to some of the top regime officials. Do we have any real evidence of that, or we just need to take the Israeli military's word for it that there have been targeted assassinations?
More than anything else, we need to wait for more information to come out. Considering the great effect of the campaign last year, I wouldn't underestimate Israeli capabilities. And we've seen the Iranians in the past make all kinds of mistakes and all kinds of assumptions about what Israel could do and not do. And we also have to note that this attack happened although people were waiting for this, it didn't happen at the estimated time. Last time it was night attacks. This time it was the morning hours. It's the middle of the weekend. I don't know exactly how the Iranians chose to operate. Let's hold judgment, withhold judgment about this for a while. But I think that if the Israelis are claiming...
We have to go in now. For our listeners, we just had to interrupt this podcast recording in real time so we could all go to our protected spaces and bomb shelters because there was news of missile launches. So this is all very real time. Amos, we were talking about needing to wait and see before we find out whether these strikes have really hit any of the top officials of the Iranian regime.
Yes, and I would assume that the results could be relatively optimistic from an Israeli point of view. I'm not sure that we can get the same results as in June, but there has been an enormous amount of planning going on between the Israelis and the Americans recently. And apparently the Israeli and American side are one or two steps ahead of the competition when it comes to fighting the Iranians. This doesn't mean, on the one hand, that we would be immune from Iranian damage. And on the other hand, even if you manage to assassinate some top personas in the Iranian regime, it doesn't necessarily lead to the collapse of the regime. We'll have to see how these things evolve. But I wouldn't underestimate the American and Israeli capabilities to bring some damage to Tehran.
Amos, I know you're not an Iran expert, but it felt so clear for quite a while that as much as Netanyahu and Israel overall wanted this to play out the way it is playing out today, President Trump would have been very happy to avoid it in the form of major concessions from the Iranians on their nuclear program. Do you have any theories as to why Iran chose to bring it to this point, preferring an attack of this level or risking an attack on this level to real concessions on their nuclear program?
Well, these are not my theories, but I spoke to quite a few experts, both in the U.S. and in Israel, regarding that. Because, as you said, it was quite clear for quite some time that Trump was not very interested in a new war in the Middle East, and he was trying to avoid it. It didn't. You could see his body language. You could see the specific words he chose to address these issues. He wasn't too keen on another round with the Iranians. I think the president felt that he didn't have any other choice by now. The assumption is that, again, it has to do with personas. The supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, is 86 years old. He's been in power for ages, almost 37 years. He's Khomeini's successor since May of 89. He's a tough ideologist. And he's not the kind of guy who bends easily. He was not really willing to be too flexible about these matters. And it's his long-held opinion that whenever Iran gives up in such negotiations, immediately there's another demand from Western forces for it to become flexible again and to bring to the table more concessions. So for him, it's a battle of survival. And I would assume that in the eyes of those around him, the leadership of the regime, it's a battle worth fighting, either dying as martyrs or somehow being smarter than the opposition and willing to being able to outmaneuver the Americans and the Israelis in order to survive to see another day. And again, the verdict is not out yet. It's true that it seems that to some extent, Israel and America took the Iranians by surprise, and to some extent, these bombings have been successful. But we don't know yet where this would lead. I still think that America has the upper hand. But will it necessarily lead to a regime collapse and a regime change? This is not Venezuela and this is not Maduro. It's a country of more than 90 million people. It's a very brutal and ruthless regime that has been in charge for ages and has been able to quash any kind of opposition for many, many years, using any means necessary in order to survive. I wouldn't underestimate what the regime is capable of doing in order to try and survive. And even if Khamenei does die, they've already announced that they have a long list of successors waiting in line. And they're not about to give up, I think. We'll have to see how this plays out, but it's not. It doesn't seem to be a likely scenario in which tomorrow Iran surrenders completely and says, all right, anything you want, you'll get as long as you don't kill us. This isn't the way the leadership has behaved.
And what do we make of Trump's message to the Iranian people? We're doing this for you. So once the bombing pauses or stops, get out on the streets and take advantage of it. And he's also challenging the military and police to lay down their arms and surrender or die. Is this posturing, or does the result of this really, to a certain extent, depend on how Iranians respond to the attack on their country?
So this is extremely interesting. He's going all the way. He's rather ambitious, and he's shooting with all his guns now in order to get maximum results. He's not talking of only a nuclear deal or dealing with ballistic missiles or attempting to end Iranian support of proxies. He's calling on the Iranian people for a full-scale revolt against the regime in order to overturn, in order to change direction completely. It's quite a gamble, and we'll see if it actually succeeds. But what he's hoping right now is to see millions of people on the streets again, the way they did go there in early and mid-January of this year. Of course, the regime acted very aggressively, killed thousands, if not tens of thousands of people, and managed to block this trend with blood on the streets. But this is what happened. There will need to be more blood on the streets in order for things to change. The question, of course, is how willing those people are to engage again, to risk their lives again, and knowing what the regime is capable of doing, of killing so many people in cold blood, of throwing people into jails, of torturing them, raping, and so on. All this has happened before, and especially during the last 2 months. This is what he's attempting to do. We'll have to see how this plays out. I'm sure it's extremely frightening for people in Tehran and other cities in Iran to consider that. But we will know somewhere around midnight or perhaps later on. I would assume that there will be curfews in most of these major Iranian cities, but we'll see how the public reacts and if people are actually willing to take to the streets in order to finally overthrow the regime. But this is going to get messy and bloody, and I don't know how much of this would affect Israelis or Americans, but in Iran itself, it would not only be bloodshed with Israel and America, it will also be there will also be blood between the protest movement and the government.
Amos, finally, I would imagine that even if regime change does not happen, there has to be some great celebration or positive feelings in the upper echelons of the Israeli military at getting another shot at severely degrading Iran's missile capabilities and presumably some of its nuclear capabilities again.
It's more of a mixed bag, I think. It's not as if I've met with many of those generals after the war in June. In most cases, we were quite proud of their achievements, but nobody was claiming that this is going to be over soon or that they just need another round with the Iranians to to fix everything. I didn't see anybody being, except for perhaps Netanyahu and Katz, the defense minister. I didn't hear new, statements about being trigger happy and about wishing another round with Iran. The way things played out right now, this is what the president has decided. And of course, Israel was worried that Trump would settle for some kind of an agreement regarding restraining the nuclear plan without demanding an end to the regime. Because what would have happened under such a scenario was that the international community would lift the sanctions, that the economic situation in Iran would improve, and then the regime could stay in spite of this massacre of its own civilians. Quite clearly, this is not what Israel was looking for, but at least at the professionals, at least among the generals and the colonels and so on, I didn't see any real appetite for another round with Iran. This is the way things played out, and nobody had this in mind earlier. The Israelis, along with the Americans, the Brits, and everybody else in the West, were quite taken by surprise when those events broke in late December or early January. It's not as if we haven't seen this in the past, but it hasn't. It's never been this massive and this messy. Right now, this is, of course, where we are, and this is affecting everything.
Amos, there's nothing that we journalists hate more than being asked to predict the future. But how comfortable are you making your bomb shelter? How much milk and eggs have you bought? How long do you think that this particular episode is going to last? After the last round was famously 12 days long.
Well, last time, as you may recall, I was out of the country for the first few days. So this time I'm ready and I'm in Israel, but I'm actually staying with friends at Hod HaSharon. I'm not at home right now, and somehow my family is spread all over the place, outside of the country, inside the country, a kid in the army, and so on. We'll have to see. It doesn't seem to me right now as a sort of an end of the world scenario. The thing that had frightened me for a long time, for many, many years, was war with Iran, which would find Hezbollah very strong and willing and capable of launching tens of thousands of missiles and rockets towards Israel. Thankfully, this kind of scenario never happened, because Israel was smarter at dealing with Hezbollah before it began dealing with Iran. So there's a certain amount of danger here, but I don't see this as an end of the world. I'm quite curious whether this would lead to a final victory over Iran or not. And I think one thing that Netanyahu needs to do is not to mislead the public. It's going to be hard and perhaps costly. But there's a chance here that things would change. If the regime is magically removed, I think this is good news for everybody in the region.
Amos Harel, senior defense analyst for Haaretz. Thanks for jumping in between sirens and letting us know what's happening and explaining some of it to us. Stay safe.
Thank you, Allison. You as well.
And that's it for this episode of the Haaretz Podcast. Thanks to my guest, Amos Harel, to producer Dan Brumer, and editor Adi Shacham. Don't forget, if you want to keep listening to the podcast and never miss an episode, subscribe to us on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And to keep up with all the latest news on Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, don't forget to subscribe to and follow Haaretz.com. I'm Allison Kaplan Sommer, and until next time, shalom from Tel Aviv.